Can I see that?
How many we got? Huh?
There's 200 names.
Not 200.
One page there.
Not everybody reads.
7 pages. Are you good? Whoever's reading.
We're live.
Okay.
Are we live?
Yep.
Hey everybody who's been watching us today, and those of you who haven't been watching us today, hopefully you're watching us tonight. We just finished day 56 of America's Run for the Fallen, and we are in Kansas. We are in El Dorado, Kansas for our overnight stop. And we did not have a venue tonight to read the names at. Like last night we were at American Legion, Post 4. And so tonight we do not have a venue, so as is our tradition to read the names every single night, we are going to read them in a hotel room. Because, you know, we're together and we want to make sure that every one of these names is heard as we read them throughout the day. Not everybody gets to hear them, but it's also very noisy. And you know, I hadn't mentioned that before, but there is a lot of noise out there, wind and vehicles, and not every name actually gets to be heard to those who are listening to us live. So we're going to reread the name. We're going to stand in for the families one more time today as a group in our room. And we ran for 200 service members, 200 names of fallen men and women. And I believe our marker count was 49. So 49 dates of death for 200 service members. And Kristen will talk about the dates that encompass, but without, we're just going to read the names now. Anybody who's joining her.
The dates that we ran for today were from March 6th through June 1st, 2008. Chief Petty Officer Lance Michael Vaccaro, United States Navy. Corporal Jose A. Penuga Morales, United States Army. Senior Airman Blanca Adriana Luna, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant John Calvin Gaston, United States Army. Sergeant Gabriel Guzman, United States Army. Senior Master Sergeant Thomas Edward Clutt, United States Air Force. Petty Officer 3rd Class George Earl Thompson Jr., United States Navy. Lieutenant Ronald Earl Irwin, United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Ernesto G. Cimarusti, United States Army. Corporal Robert T. McDavid, United States Army. Captain Torrey R. Mallard, United States Army. Sergeant 1st Class Sean M. Sush, United States Army. Specialist Donald A. Burkett, United States Army. Corporal Scott A. McIntosh, United States Army. Sergeant Philip R. Anderson, United States Army. Staff Sergeant David D. Julian, United States Army. Master Sergeant John Garfield Barabal III, United States Air Force. Lance Corporal David Harrison Miles, United States Marine Corps. Gunnery Sergeant Christopher Scott Backus, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant Robert Lewis Hampton, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Laurent J. West, United States Army. Specialist Manuel Arturo Valerio Jr., United States Army. Private 1st Class Tenzin L. Sampton, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Juantrea T. Bradley, United States Army. Specialist Dustin C. Jackson, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Henry Antonio Moy, United States Army. Petty Officer 2nd Class Lawrence Charles Bivens, United States Navy. Sergeant 1st Class Joseph Vasquez, United States Army. PB2 Jeremiah Wade Carmack, United States Army. Private 1st Class Nathaniel Dane Thibault, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Colin J. Bowen, United States Army National Guard. 1st Lieutenant Alexander Nicholas Sergio Prezioso, United States Marine Corps. Major David Lawrence Yagi, United States Marine Corps. PB1 Vincent Albert Trujillo, United States Army. Specialist Alexander Preston Chase, United States Army. Private 1st Class William David O'Brien, United States Army. 2nd Lieutenant David Joseph Mitchell, United States Air Force. Specialist Lorando J. Brown, United States Army National Guard. Petty Officer 3rd Class Cody Joseph Holland, United States Navy. Private 1st Class Grant Christian Schreimer, Grant Christian Shermer, United States Army. Sergeant Jason Ryan Bowling, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Michael D. Elledge, United States Army. Specialist Christopher C. Simpson, United States Army. Specialist Amber Raquel Crowder, United States Army. Petty Officer 2nd Class Dominique Jaquez Martin, United States Navy. Sergeant Gregory D. Unruh, United States Army.
Private First Class Anton D. Robinson. Sergeant Isaiah Musin, United States Army. Sergeant Isaiah Richard Davis, United States Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Lee Allen Brooks, United States Army. Major Raymond Thomas Slidell from the United States Army. Staff Sergeant Alana Ron Close from the United States Air Force. Airman Christine Marie Passwell from the United States Navy. Private First Class Tyler J. Smith from the United States Army. Sergeant Keith M. Moppin from the United States Army. Staff Sergeant William R. Neal from the United States Army. Tech Sergeant William Haywood Jefferson from the United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Eric Rivera from the United States Army. Captain Donald Lee Brakewood from the United States Army. Sergeant David B. Williams from the United States Army National Guard. Sergeant Thomas C. Ray II from the United States Air National Guard. Specialist David S. Spellman from the United States Air National Guard. Sergeant First Class Kenneth Dwayne Walker from the United States Army. Specialist Devin Gerald Cooper from the United States Army. Staff Sergeant Christopher M. Hagan from the United States Army. PB-1 George Delgado from the United States Army. Master Sergeant Eugene Lee Wallace from the United States Air Force. Lance Corporal Justin L. Cannon from the United States Marine Corps Reserve. Andrew James Hadziger from the United States Army. Corporal Jose Rubio Hernandez from the United States Army. Staff Sergeant Sean David Gillespie from the United States Army. Staff Sergeant Joseph D. Gamboa from the United States Army. Airman Kevin Travis Beckles from the United States Navy. Corporal Stephen I. Candelo from the United States Army. Specialist Kristen Michelle Kurtzon from the United States Army. Specialist Gregory B. Rundell from the United States Army. Petty Officer 2nd Class Stephen Ray Kirkland from the United States Navy. Specialist Eric Woods Mooney from the United States Army. Specialist Joshua A. Molina from the United States Army. Private First Class Gene B. Higue from the United States Marine Corps. Sergeant Charles A. Jankowski from the United States Army. Specialist Martin John Bird from the United States Army. Corporal Keith Gerard Mindy from the United States Marine Corps. Lieutenant William Joseph McKinnon from the United States Navy. Sergeant Javon K. Jordan from the United States Army. Sergeant First Class Katina Lenise Searcy from the United States Army. Private First Class Patrick J. Miller from the U.S. Army. Specialist Darrell L. Bennett from the U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Colton James Fatigue from the U.S. Army. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Randolph Browning IV from the U.S. Air Force. Sergeant Terrell W. Gilmore from the U.S. Army National Guard. Major William G. Hall from the U.S. Marine Corps. Sergeant Dwayne D. Newell from the U.S. Army. Command Master Sergeant John Andrew Roberto from the U.S. Air Force. Senior Chief Petty Officer Charles George Zwerzinski from the U.S. Navy. PV-2 Kendrick Torres Johnson II, U.S. Army. PV-2 Drew Joseph Isham from the U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Lucas Michael Keeble from the U.S. Air Force. Master Sergeant Beverly Ray Tuttle from the U.S. Air Force. Lance Corporal Cody Elijah Blanket from the U.S. Marine Corps. Petty Officer Second Class James Anthony Elrich from the U.S. Navy. Sergeant Nicholas A. Robertson from the U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Travis L. Griffin from the U.S. Air Force. Specialist Douglas Robert Grell from the U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Monica Beth Johnson from the U.S. Air Force. PV2 Randy Vincent Davis from the U.S. Army. Sergeant Marcus Daniel Smedley from the U.S. Army. Private First Class Eduardo Domingo Canales from the U.S. Marine Corps. Colonel Stephen K. Scott from the U.S. Army. Major Stuart A. Wolfen from the U.S. Army. Captain Ulysses Burgos Cruz from the U.S. Army. Specialist Matthew T. Morris from the U.S. Army. Private First Class Shane D. Penley from the U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Jeremiah E. McNeil from the U.S. Army National Guard. Staff Sergeant Emmanuel Pickett from the U.S. Air National Guard.
Corporal Brett B. Browder, U.S. Marine Corps. Sergeant Michael T. Lilly, U.S. Army. Specialist Jason C. Kazur, U.S. Army. Sergeant Richard A. Vaughn, U.S. Army. Sergeant Timothy M. U.S. Army. Sergeant Dale Tucker, U.S. Army. Major Mark E. Rosenberg, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Jeffrey L. Hartley, U.S. Army. Specialist Williams Charles, Sergeant P. Fuchsia, U.S. Army. Sergeant Jesse A. Alt, U.S. Army. Specialist Jacob J. Fairbanks, U.S. Army. Specialist Jeremiah C. Hughes, U.S. Army. Tech Sergeant Anthony L. Capra, U.S. Air Force. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez Cedric Collins, U.S. Army. Private Benjamin Wesley Cook, U.S. Army. Specialist John Michael Conant, U.S. Army. Airman Harvin Alex Samuels, U.S. Navy. Seaman Recruit Drew Robert Murray, U.S. Navy. Tag Sergeant Pamela Allison Dombeck, U.S. Air Force. Sergeant Merlin German, U.S. Marine Corps. Specialist William E. Allman, U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Curtis James Boyek, U.S. Army. Lance Corporal Jeffrey Christopher Hearn, U.S. Marine Corps. Specialist Diana Moda, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant James Frederick Devine, Senior, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Gilberto Mota, U.S. Army. Specialist Nicholas Brandon Booker, U.S. Army. Corporal Rochelle Charmaine Rivard, U.S. Army. Sergeant Joseph A. Richard III, U.S. Army. Specialist Arturo Peretta Cruz, U.S. Army. Lance Corporal Dean D. Opica, U.S. Marine Corps. Corporal Richard J. Nelson, U.S. Marine Corps. Corporal Kyle Weston Wilkes, U.S. Marine Corps. First Sergeant Luke John Mercadante, U.S. Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Lauren Rachel Hopper, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant William Robert Rimmer, U.S. Air Force. Sergeant First Class Douglas Brent Flatt, U.S. Army. Private Kendall Darius Gilfillan, U.S. Army. Command Sergeant Major George Lewis Young, U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Philip O'Keefe Blackman Sr., U.S. Army. Private Tony Jeanette Miller, U.S. Army. Specialist Brandon Lee Scott Kepler, U.S. Army. Specialist Benjamin K. Brosh, U.S. Army. Specialist Lance O. Eakes, U.S. Army. Lieutenant Colonel Suzanne Lee Bragg, U.S. Army. Airman Jennifer Diane Austin, U.S. Navy. Sergeant Jason Joseph Estevanic, U.S. Army. Sergeant Sergio Austin Sanchez, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Eugene Roger K. Jr., U.S. Air Force. Airman First Class Bradley Davis Burnett, U.S. Air Force. Petty Officer Second Class Daryl Deonta Emerson, U.S. Navy. Sergeant Adam Stewart Daniel, U.S. Army. Private William Ray Coxwell Edmund, U.S. Army. Petty Officer Cherie L. Morton, U.S. Navy. Sergeant Adam J. Colas, U.S. Army. Specialist Stephen J. Christopherson, U.S. Army. Lance Corporal Richard Scott Bailey, U.S. Marine Corps. First Lieutenant Matthew Ryan Vandergrift, U.S. Marine Corps. First Lieutenant Airman Apprentice Adrian M. Campos, U.S. Navy. Private Ronald R. Harrison, U.S. Army. Specialist Michael Ashley Salzman, U.S. Army. Private Andrew Joseph Wise, U.S. Army. Lance Corporal Jordan C. Ayerter, U.S. Marine Corps. Corporal Jonathan T. Yale, U.S. Marine Corps. Petty Officer Emilio Anthony Padulci, U.S. Navy. Seaman Recruit Adam Hunter C., U.S. Navy.
Captain Jason Douglas Welch, United States Air Force. Petty Officer Second Class Elizabeth Ann Lindstrom, United States Navy. Specialist Joshua Dane Carroll, United States Army. Sergeant Senior Master Sergeant Robert Harold Chadwick, United States Air Force. Staff Sergeant Dwayne Edward Thomas Sr., United States Army. Lance Corporal Derek Robert Risslin, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant First Class Charles Dwayne Burton, United States Army. Staff Sergeant David Allen Strickland, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Kenneth Stevenson Jackson, United States Army. Sergeant Randy Gene Miller, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Timothy Joseph Miller, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Ted Michael Everidge, United States Air Force. Petty Officer Second Class Nathan Charles Scholl, United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Larry Wandell Shax Jr., United States Army. Airman Robert Wayne Guilfoyle, United States Air Force. Sergeant Robert T. Rapp, United States Army. Specialist Stephen R. Koch, United States Army. Senior recruit Owen Ingram Martinez, United States Navy. Seaman Patricia Louise Thompson, United States Navy. Petty Private First Class Bobby Ray Lermus, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Christopher S. Frost, United States Air Force. Sergeant Stephen John Cahill, United States Army.
So 3 names in particular stand out today, 200 names, 49 dates of death. Christopher Simpson, shout out to Kate McLaughlin, thinking about your boy. William Jefferson, thinking about the Jefferson family. And also Stephen Koch, Christine and Bill, we remembered your boy today. And also your daughter Lenny. So just take a moment of silence as we reflect on these names today and their families and their service to our country. Amen.
Amen.
We'll see everybody in the morning for the start of day 57, and the honor to name out those heroes and remember for their families. Good night, everybody.
Good night.